Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Matsuoko and board members. My name is Cheri Rae. I am an author of this new book about dyslexia called Dyslexialand, and an advocate who networks with dyslexia experts across the country. For years, I served as a dyslexia consultant for this school district. I'm also the mother of a dyslexic son who attended Santa Barbara schools. He finally learned to read when he was in 7th grade through private, intensive outside services, 5 days a week, 4 hours a day for months, at enormous expense. Thank you for putting dyslexia on the agenda. I wrote an editorial for The Independent that set our presentation in motion tonight. It is called Another Side of Paradise, on being the parent of a child with dyslexia in Santa Barbara. I described what is known as a dyslexia desert, a community like ours that lacks the kind of services available in more dyslexia-friendly schools and communities. 30 years ago, Superintendent Blas Garza commissioned a dyslexia task force in this district that cautioned that failure to provide appropriate interventions or expertise about dyslexia would, quote, contribute to the growing number of dysfunctional adults. Among its 11 recommendations are outreach to parents, collaboration among all educators, and training for all school administrators in state and federal laws to evaluate dyslexia policies and procedures. We can only imagine how respected Santa Barbara School District would have become had it implemented those recommendations and continued to build on them. And more importantly, how many students' lives would have been improved. The recent passage of California's dyslexia law, co-sponsored by our then Assembly member Doss Williams, and its guidelines added much needed resources for educators. I've heard a lot tonight about the balanced literacy approach, and I have to say that it is one that is ineffective for students with dyslexia, according to the International Dyslexia Association, because it does not focus on the decoding skills these students need to succeed in reading. It instead recommends the explicit and systematic approach known as structured literacy, noting, quote, there is substantial evidence that it is more effective for all readers, unquote. Reading is only part of the dyslexia story. You must also consider the emotional component and its lifelong consequences. Several years ago, a FCMAT report that studied this district's special education department noted, quote, students come into this district with learning disabilities and they leave with emotional disturbances. Unfortunately, that hasn't changed. I know a dyslexic elementary school student who says, every school year feels like 3. A dyslexic junior high student who admits, I always feel like school isn't made for people like me. A dyslexic high school student who attempted suicide twice. I met recently with a dyslexic 64-year-old teacher who said to me with tears in his eyes, I can still remember the horror I felt in 3rd grade when I realized how much more time I had to spend in school. The life chances of too many of these students who believe that they are stupid, crazy, and lazy diminish early as they seek ways to avoid their suffering, which includes truancies, self-harm, and substance abuse. They get into trouble with the law and they fill our prisons. I've been to teen court, the DA's office, the probation department on behalf of some of these students. Too often, dyslexic students get passed along for years without the appropriate instruction that will give them the skills that they need to succeed, and then they are blamed and shamed for their lack of skills. If you're wealthy in Santa Barbara, you hire tutors, you send the kids to Lindenwood Bell, you keep it quiet, pay for whatever you need. But even those wealthy students suffer emotionally. But don't get me started on the plight of students whose parents cannot afford a lawyer or find an advocate, who don't speak English, or simply just don't have enough money to pay the $200 or more a week, year after year, for a properly trained tutor, because these kids don't get the help they need in or out of school. Teaching dyslexic students how to read, write, and spell and succeed in school is no mystery. The only mystery is why we don't do it. The pattern of dyslexic strengths and weaknesses is far too often misinterpreted in the classroom. We could help support these students in their many strengths in so many ways. Offer American Sign Language or coding, provide the latest in assistive technology with apps and easy access to audiobooks, provide alternate assessments and project-based learning, and In line with the requirements of California Education Code Section 51204.5, ensure that students learn in the classroom that so many of our heroes were dyslexic, from George Washington to JFK, Albert Einstein to Steve Jobs. Please also remember that dyslexia does not go away. You learn to accommodate it and build on strengths. I know of several dyslexic employees in this district who have anxiety about the consequences of disclosure. The new HR director, Dr. John Becchio, knows a lot about dyslexia since we worked closely together on this issue for years. It is my hope that he will develop policies and procedures to address dyslexia for employees so that they will feel properly supported and no longer live in fear for their jobs. Dyslexia has been an issue in this district for 30 years. An outspoken advocate fought for dyslexic children here for 20 years, and I've been at it for 10. It is way beyond time to develop a comprehensive approach to addressing dyslexia, its strengths and weaknesses. But this time, please, do the right thing. Hire an outside and independent consulting team with proven dyslexia experts to develop a blueprint for best practices for the 21st century. We can't keep putting a Band-Aid on an emergency situation. And if you teach dyslexics to read, write, and read, reason, and communicate, you're going to increase your scores by 20%. Thank you very much.